Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategy Podcast, here for another episode with a man from Denver, Colorado. His name is Jonathan Abramson, of a company that he owns called Metro City Roofing. And we had some really interesting conversations. But let me give you a little background on. He was born in New York City. He then went to Florida and got his bachelor's down in Florida, and then his MBA down in Arizona. And then he went on to corporate America in the Silicon Valley, did quite well there, working with many companies, 100 million, 400 million. And he's been married for 19 years and he has two great children. So we talked a lot about core competency leading into core persona, leading into ideal client, and working with that ideal client for a long period of time. So extending the buying time for the particular client or the retention of that client and getting the buying frequency to go more so that you up your revenues. A lot of interesting stuff on this. I think you'll find this really great. Without further ado, let's welcome Jonathan to the call. The first question I have for you is, because I know you were born in New York, but when I looked at your trail, you went from New York, then you went down and got your bachelor's degree in Florida, then you went over and got
Always go Gators.
Go Gators. Then you went from there to Arizona to get your MBA. And then from there, you headed to California, more of the Silicon Valley area. Is that right?
That is correct. I worked at Apple for a bunch of years as well in supply chain management.
That's awesome. How? I mean, it's like, okay, cold, warm, more warm. Now, not so boiling hot warm. Was it by design, or was it just what happened?
It's an interesting journey. This is my 7th state that I've lived in. However, most of the year, this weekend accepted, Colorado is absolutely lovely. We have more than 300 days of sunshine a year. And for the most part, even if it snows 6 inches, 2 days later, it's gone and you can golf again or get back to work.
That's pretty cool. Because here in New Hampshire, once the weather sticks, as you know, in New York, you're here for 3 to 5 months. And I see sometimes people playing golf out in the snow. It makes me laugh. I'm like, that's dedication.
In Colorado, we could ski in the morning and golf in the afternoon, depending on the time of year. So it's pretty neat.
Excellent. So Metro City Roofing, you worked for corporations and then you worked for a roofing company, and you always held these high level positions within these companies. And then you decided, hey, I'm going to go into the roofing business. Let's talk about ideation for a second. How did it come about? Because a lot of people here, listen to this because people are doing, 7, 8, 10 figure businesses, whatever. But there's also a contingency of people that are listening that will say, I want to start my own company and I want to grow it past, 7 figures into the 8 figures range. And so I think the thought process of how do you start it? Because I remember reading what in your articles, it wasn't always a smooth sailing in the first year, right? As you were starting to grow. So
a startup is never a smooth sail. It's a lot of strategy and tactics, and then learning from experts in the field. And sadly, sometimes learning from mistakes. And as long as you don't repeat the mistake, it's a valuable mistake. So with a startup, you wear many, many hats. And at the same time, you do pivot from your initial objective from time to time to, in the technology space, it's find, that minimum viable product, to find that product market fit. And so even within roofing, I worked for another company. And like many roofing companies, and if anybody around the country looks up a roofing company in most cities, you'll find that they do residential and commercial. And so I went down that path as well. What I recognized is, what's my sweet spot? My sweet spot is residential roof replacements, hail damage driven through insurance claims. And so what I've done is I've recognized that and said, okay, this is really where I'm going to focus. I'm going to not worry about being the lowest cost retail bid. And I'm not going to focus on competing with commercial divisions just because they invite you to an RFP for an apartment complex, as an example, where you should feel grateful to have been included, but likely never had a chance to possibly win it other than being the lowest price. So I've refined and honed in on what I do well, what we do well. And our obsession, similar to like Amazon with their leadership principles, which is all about, not the first principle is customer obsession, is we want to make sure that we deliver the same fantastic service 3 years from now, 5 years, 10 years from now that we did in year 1, year 2, et cetera.
Interesting. I'm going to unpack that for the people who didn't get this. This is what I got out of it. You know, customer obsession, number one. One of the things that you've done successfully that we're constantly talking to businesses, and what's your core competency, right? What is the core competency that you're going into? And you're driving into the core competency and then into the core persona of that ideal client. You know kind of what that client is, and you're looking long-term. So you're looking for retention and extension and expansion of the business and happy long-term clients, which throw you referrals, right? So that is definitely a strategy in sales that a lot of people, they neglect in their own business. So let's go and talk about sales a little bit more. One of the things that I love what you do in your company is you've been able to identify that, hey, listen, I can get referrals from a certain base, and it's a much easier sale, and it's a much easier client engagement process, as well as a form of leverage in the business. So you had mentioned that you get referrals from insurance agents, and those are critical to your business. Could you tell me what the process is that you're using to get referrals from these insurance agents and the way that you build the relationships with them?
So as a New Yorker, trust is earned over time. It's not a given. And so this approach of roofing companies that try to work with local insurance agents and insurance companies is not new, but they're tremendously valuable relationships when you are given a chance and you have proven yourself that not only do you do what you say you're going to do, but you ask your customer to please contact that agent and say exactly the experience that you had. You're not asking anybody to make anything up. You're just saying, please contact your agent if we did what we said we would do. And if you're satisfied or thrilled with the experience that you've had, please let your agent know. And hopefully that chance that a single agent gave you as a roofing company turns into a second chance and a third chance. And many of the local agents will have lists of roofing companies that they consider. What you want to do is to earn the right to be on the list and then earn the right to move up the list so that eventually you're in the top 3, ideally in the pole position.
So you're top of mind when something comes up and their mind goes, wham, okay, hey, we got to go to Jonathan, and that's the place to go, to Metro City. So many people do not invest enough time and energy into building relationships which give them the leverage in business. And I find you do this really, really well. Where did you learn that from? I know New York City was, you got to build trust over time, but.
Sure. So for me, I have a very atypical roofing background, having a master in business degree with an emphasis in supply chain management, and then working at Apple, probably the largest of the companies that helped form my approach to business. And as I was at Apple during the Steve Jobs era, the Tim Cook era, and then just being obsessed with Silicon Valley companies, from Mark Benioff at Salesforce to now Jeff Bezos, obviously not Silicon Valley, up in Amazon, in the greater Seattle area. But it's building the right infrastructure and building the right approach, as you said, for the long term. If you recall, even the early decade or more of Amazon, it was always about reinvesting and thinking long term. It was not about maximizing shareholder value on the next fiscal quarter. It was about building the right organization that has the sustainability to deliver on the long run. And that's what I've tried to do with Metro City Roofing. Yes, we are still a reasonably young company, but at the same time, the obsession is there for myself and all the folks who work with me to make sure that we build the right and completely satisfied customers every time that we have a customer interaction. We choose to not lose a single customer interaction as thinking about it anything more than it's a gift.
So we're talking with Jonathan Abramson, and he owns a company called Metro City Roofing in Denver. And if you have roofing needs, you know where to get him. I think what you said is so critical. I mean, a lot of times I'm speaking with entrepreneurs and they're like, I'm building my company, I'm going to exit. That's what I'm going to do. That's the way. And there's nothing wrong with that philosophy of thought. But I always ask them this question, Jonathan, which is, what happens if it doesn't sell? Right? I mean, I was involved in a company and eventually it sold off for $2 billion. And, we wanted to sell 8 years earlier than it actually went. Right? So, a lot of companies, especially if they're not even looking to sell, what they're not looking is exactly what you just said. Look long term. So what's the business supposed to be like in 20 years if you still have the business? And that helps one focus on the things that are really important, which is that customer experience that you're talking about. And plus, you just have happier days. Would you agree with that when you focus long term?
Absolutely, because you're always thinking about building the right company, the company that you really want to build. And doing when people start companies, they do it for many times I want to build the company that delivers value to customers, and I want to work at the organization or in the environment that I think I've always wanted to. And so the company that I worked for previously had a certain way of interacting and operating, and that worked for me for a time until it didn't. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had. It helped me learn the industry, learn the good and the bad. No different than being a parent, right? You try to emulate certain things that you remember fondly, and you try to change the things that you don't. And so I'm trying to build the organization that not only do I want to be a part of, but also that will create raving fans that every customer that I touch, that I interact with, that the organization has the fortunate success to interact with and earn as customers, that we deliver on the promises that we make.
So what are the ways of having raving fans? A lot of people want to have salespeople or have people selling for them, but they don't hire correctly. They don't make what I believe you said, make smart hires, if I remember correctly prior to.
That is correct.
So, and I think you had mentioned you look for intelligent people with communication skills, someone who enjoys customer service, and a bunch of other wonderful things that, you just don't hire anyone. Can you tell me the process you're using when hiring your salespeople and that you would recommend to either other companies to follow the best practices of what you're doing?
Sure. So for me, customer service is what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for roofing experience. I could teach you roofing experience. What I can't teach you is how to interact with other people where you build credibility, build trust, and build a rapport so that the customer wants to work with you. It's just something within each of us where you either like human beings, you like people, you like helping others. I mean, when I worked for a large company or large companies, I thought and I knew that I did great work, but I wasn't interacting on that one-to-one basis, which I get to now. I get to help individuals. I get to help Mr. or Mrs. Jones and help them when they need us the most. So what I want to do, especially in my hiring process, is to ask the question about a good or bad experience that you've had in customer service, what you liked about it and what you learned from it. And you can learn from something, whether it worked out great or whether it didn't work out, but it's what you do next that matters.
I think you coined that earlier, valuable mistakes, right? You learn from the stuff that did work out. So a lot of companies, they're into the multi 7-figure range. They want to get into the 8-figure, 9-figure range if they're in the 8-figure range, and they want to scale. Most of the time, not all, but many parts of the time. And you've worked in large global organizations, so, $100 million, $400 million companies and beyond. When does one know that your process is ready to scale? That would be my question for you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because many companies want to be the biggest, the largest. And those are defined in many different ways, right? In terms of top line revenue, net profit, number of projects that you work on, and many, many other descriptions. You can scale when something becomes predictable and repeatable. Those are essential, that you're not sort of winging it any longer, that you build a process around it. And processes, while many consulting firms and many organizations, large organizations, have dedicated divisions that focus on process standardization, process efficiency, when you build those infrastructures, you're able to do more volume in a more predictable, repeatable way.
And if you don't have the processes, you just said predictable, repeatable way. If you don't have that, if a company tries to do that, what I've witnessed, many companies who've tried to do that, they scale with chaos, number one, or they literally implode if they scale too fast. So folks, are those of you who are going to scale predictable and repeatable process, you heard it here from Jonathan Abramson from Metro City Roofing. I really appreciate you being on the call here today. I have one other question, which is more of a question from me, because I love what happened when you were naming your company. And I was reading about it, and so many people stress over names of companies. And originally you were going to call your company Rock Star Roofing, if I remember correctly, right?
Correct.
And that's because you had this propensity or drive in the 1980s to work, in the rock field, or be in the rock field, to be a rock star, if I have that correct. But you went to someone who said to you, let's keep it simple and rememberable, right? Or something of that. And it turned out to be your highly intelligent wife, who also has an MBA.
That is correct.
And what was that conversation like? In your head, you want a rock star, she wanted this, bring it down. But we want a name that's memorable, right? We want a name that people can identify with. And it's very easy to hear Metro City Roofing, Denver, bam, you know what you do.
Sure.
Right? But a lot of companies, put out Infinity or whatever, right? And it's like, well, okay, what does that mean, right? So during that conversation, what was the okay, she's right, and we should probably move forward?
So it's such an interesting journey. So I knew that I wanted to have the name roofing in the company name, because I wanted to make sure that it was completely clear what the company did. I didn't want exteriors, because it could be siding, it could be windows, it could be anything, it could be concrete for all we know. I wanted it to be clear that it was roofing. With my personality and my love for 80s hair bands, from Motley Crue to Rat to Skid Row to Dokken, etc., I thought that would be fun and interesting, and it would allow me to be leveraging the personality that I have. That being said, we started down this discussion of a name should be clear first, and then timeless. So for me, Metro City was simple, elegant. It was clear with the word roofing. It wasn't gimmicky or trendy, which, when I asked for some additional feedback from a small focus group that I did of about 25 sample size, one of the things that I heard from an uncle of mine was, well, Julia Roberts wouldn't take rock star limo to the Oscars. And I'm dating myself a little bit by saying Julia Roberts, who's in fewer movies these days than was back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. But Rockstar Roofing still felt gimmicky and trendy. And I see Rockstar HVAC and Rockstar, concrete as I drive the highway in the metro area. I also was thinking, again, going back to this idea of thinking long-term, what if I wanted to move outside of the metro Denver area? And I have since expanded into Colorado Springs. So we service the entire Front Range here at Metro City Roofing. And so, but if I decided to move down to Dallas, Texas, or up to Northeast into Minneapolis, I didn't want to be limited by a name that was specific to Colorado or specific to the location that I started the organization. So that's kind of the quick and dirty.
Well, it's clean, timeless, and it's scalable, so immovable. So excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of Metro City Roofing or you, what's the best way to do so?
You can reach out to us via email at info@metrocityroofing.com, or you can call us at 303-524-1000.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes. I want to thank you for being on here. It's been a pleasure. I love talking with intelligent people and intelligent business people. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day, everybody.
Well. What did you learn? I learned a lot on this call. I mean, we definitely talked about core competency, going to core persona, into the ideal client, and, working with that client long-term, because you don't want to necessarily just turn your client base over. It's more expensive to turn your client base over than it is to keep your client for a long period of time. You've already sunk your marketing cost of acquisition initially. So usually you have a much higher profitability when you are working with your clients. Now, remember, you're going to lose some clients no matter what. That's just going to happen. Statistically, it's somewhere around 38% that you can expect to lose, 32 on the high side, if you will, if you retain them. However, if you do a really good job at this, let's say that you can move that from let's just say a 40% to a 10%. Well, you retain 30% of your clients. And if you can get them to buy again and again and again and buy more and hold on to them for an extended period of time, you can do lots of great things. One of the great things that you can do is spawn way more referrals, because the speed of trust, longevity breeds trust, as long as you're taking care of your clients. That's what it's about, working long-term. And Jonathan came in initially with his business, and this is why it grew so quickly. And, he's doing quite well. It's not so much about differentiation, although that is a big play for him, but he's really trying to be different than all the other roofing companies. For example, you have a roofing company, their reputation's not all that stellar most of the time. These people come in, they sell and run, and people buy, and then they feel deceived. Well, what he's done is he's built a great reputation around not doing those type of things. And in fact, he doesn't even require a contract until after everything is accepted and the job is funded. Very big difference between himself and other companies. So be different, not differentiated, and also have sufficient cash to manage your business, because when you are going after quality, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Although if you're selling on value and you find the value proposition that they're looking for, it actually can be far quicker than if not. So it was nice having you here listening to this podcast. If you like this, please go up and give it a 5-star review. If you have ideas on topics you want to hear, or you have questions or comments, please send them over to us at youmatter@businesssuccessfactors.com. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategy Podcast. Make it a great day, and to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.